It was my 61st birthday. That was the simple fact of the day, and all I had truly wanted was a quiet, unassuming dinner with my son Leon and his wife Olivia. Maybe a few close friends, the kind who feel more like family, gathered around a table. I had pictured nothing grand, just the simple comfort of good food, the warmth of familiar company, and perhaps a single heartfelt toast to another year of managing to keep myself together without completely falling apart. It felt like a small, reasonable thing to ask for. Instead, the night ended in a way I never could have anticipated. It concluded in the roaring vacuum of complete silence, with me staring across a table lit by the soft, flickering glow of candles. I watched as my only child stood before our friends and publicly laid claim to something that had never, not for a single moment, been his to take. The evening started out normally enough, or at least what passes for normal these days. The restaurant was one of those trendy new establishments Olivia had picked, a place that felt more like a concept than a place to eat. The walls were all exposed brick, and delicate Edison lights hung from the ceiling, casting a warm amber light that was probably meant to feel intimate, but instead just made it hard to read the menu. The servers, all young and earnest, insisted on calling you boss, a verbal tic that made my skin crawl every time. I had barely managed to settle into my chair and arrange my purse when Olivia slid a gift bag across the table. The tissue paper inside was fluffed up like a peacock's tail, a burst of bright, cheerful color. "Happy birthday, Grace," she said, her smile wide and perfectly practiced. Inside, nestled within the crinkling paper, was a tiny, printed baby onesie. The words on the chest were stark and bold, "Best Grandma Ever." I stared at it, the fabric soft and impossibly small in my hands. My heart gave a little flutter, a confused, hopeful leap that I immediately tried to suppress. Olivia's eyes were wide, her expression a careful performance of manicured sweetness. "We thought it was time," she announced to the table, her voice just a little too loud. "Time to start planning the nursery." She then turned that bright, expectant gaze to her husband. "Right, Liam?" He smiled, but it was an expression that didn't quite reach his eyes. It felt almost too calm, too rehearsed, as if he were an actor reciting a line he'd memorized weeks ago. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, Mom, especially since we'll have a lot more space to work with soon." I blinked, the word echoing in my head. More space? What on earth was he talking about? I looked from his face to Olivia's, searching for a clue. Olivia leaned in, her perfume drifting across the table, a cloying floral scent. "We're just so incredibly grateful you agreed, Grace," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Honestly, not every mom would be this generous with her home. The low hum of conversation at our table sputtered and died. A sudden, heavy quiet fell over us. My friends looked from me to Liam, their smiles frozen and uncertain. I frowned, my mind racing to catch up. What had I supposedly agreed to? My apartment? Generous? The words felt like pieces from a different puzzle. Before I could form a question, before I could voice the profound confusion that was beginning to churn in my stomach, Liam stood up. He tapped his spoon gently against the side of his wineglass, the clear, high-pitched ring cutting through the restaurant's ambient noise. The sound was a signal, a call to order. "Can I have everyone's attention for just a second?" he asked, his voice full of a practiced, easy charm that always unsettled me. He waited for the servers to pause, for the nearby tables to glance over. Tonight isn't just about celebrating my incredible mom's birthday, as wonderful as that is. It's also about a new beginning, a big, exciting change for our family. Olivia, on cue, took out her phone, her thumb swiping across the screen to open the camera. I saw the small red light appear in the corner. She was recording. "We're moving into Mom's apartment," Liam announced, his face breaking into a wide, triumphant beam. He looked around the table, making eye contact with each of our friends, soaking in their reactions. "It just makes perfect sense when you think about it. She doesn't need all that space anymore, And with us starting a family, we desperately do. It's such a gift, honestly. Just so incredibly generous of her. He raised his glass higher. So, let's all raise a glass to the woman who made it all possible, to my mom. A chorus of glasses clinked together. The sound was sharp, brittle. I didn't move. I couldn't. My fork, heavy with a piece of salmon I hadn't eaten, was suspended in midair, held limply in my hand. My own wine glass remained on the table, untouched. Liam's gaze finally landed on me. His smile stretched just a little too hard, a little too tight at the corners. Right, Mom? The pressure in the room snapped into place like a trap springing shut. It was suffocating. Olivia had the phone's camera aimed directly at my face, a silent, unblinking witness. Everyone stared, their faces a mixture of surprise and forced politeness, waiting for me to play my part, to confirm the beautiful story my son had just spun. So I nodded. It wasn't a nod of agreement. It was a nod of pure, unadulterated panic. My brain had frozen solid. All the words I should have said. What are you talking about? We never discussed this. That's my home. Were lodged in my throat, choked off by a sudden, paralyzing wave of shock. I felt as though I'd been shoved onto a brightly lit stage in the middle of a play I'd never auditioned for, with no script and no idea what came next. I forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster, took a small sip of wine, and prayed for the moment to pass, for the conversation to move on. The moment did not move on, not really. The general conversation at the table eventually picked back up, a strained and patchy thing, full of false starts and awkward silences. Our friends, bless them, tried to steer the topic towards safer waters, asking about work and complimenting the wine. But the bomb had been detonated, and we were all just sitting in the fallout. I sat there as the blood seemed to drain from my face, my skin growing cold and clammy. The expensive meal on my plate, which I had been looking forward to all day, had turned to tasteless, pulpy cardboard in my mouth. Olivia, completely oblivious, or perhaps just choosing to ignore the heavy atmosphere she had created, launched into an excited monologue about all the ways she was going to redecorate my apartment, my home. She talked about paint swatches, holding her hand up against the dark wood of the table as if it were a wall, debating between serene sage and whisper white. She detailed where the crib would go in the second bedroom, my sewing room, and how they would need to install blackout curtains. Then she laughed, a light, airy sound that grated on my ears. And of course, we'll let you visit, Grace. You can even still keep your plants on the balcony if you want. It was delivered as a magnanimous gesture, a queen bestowing a favor upon a loyal subject. Liam nodded along, adding his own brand of hollow reassurance. "We'll give you plenty of time to move everything out," he said, looking at me with an expression of performative concern. No pressure. The words hung in the air, so utterly disconnected from reality that I almost choked. They had not asked me, not once. There had been no conversation, no gentle probing to see how I might feel, no respect for my life or my autonomy. They had simply decided my future for me, then declared it as fact, announcing to all my friends that my home was no longer my own. This place, the apartment my late husband and I had shared for 30 years, was now nothing more than their starter nursery. The home I had wept in after he passed, the floors I had slept on when the grief was too heavy to carry me to bed, the walls I had patched and painted myself after a pipe burst one bitter winter, all of it had been reduced to a convenient piece of real estate they felt entitled to. I excused myself halfway through dessert, unable to stomach another bite of the ridiculously overpriced chocolate lava cake. Liam shot me a look, a flash of annoyance, that clearly communicated he thought I was being dramatic, ruining their big moment. I didn't have the strength to argue. I just mumbled something about not feeling well, a sudden headache. Olivia, ever the picture of concern, offered to call a rideshare for me. "Oh my God, of course," she said, her phone already in her hand. "You shouldn't walk if you're not well." I declined, maybe a little too sharply. The thought of being trapped in a stranger's car, making small talk while my world was imploding, was unbearable. I needed air. I needed to move. I walked. I walked for 3 long blocks in a pair of heels I hadn't worn in years, the straps digging into my skin. I didn't care that my toes were blistering or that a sharp, burning sensation was building in my chest. Each painful step was a distraction, the only thing that could temporarily silence the screaming inside my own head. By the time I finally reached my building and unlocked the door, my apartment felt different. The air was heavy, charged with a sense of violation. It no longer felt safe. It no longer felt like mine. I locked the deadbolt, then checked it again, and then a third time, my hand trembling slightly. Their voices were everywhere, echoing in the familiar quiet of my home. Olivia's tinkling laugh as she dismissed my curtains as "old lady." Liam's calm, certain voice insisting I didn't need all this space anymore. My husband's photographs lined the bookshelf in the living room, pictures of us in this very apartment, on our wedding day, on countless birthdays. I looked at his smiling face, and for the first time, the memories didn't bring comfort. They felt like warnings, warnings I had failed to heed. I sank down at my small kitchen table, my hands pressed flat against the cool, smooth surface. I just sat there, unable to move, for what must have been almost an hour. The silence of the room a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. When I finally pushed myself up, it was with a new, cold sense of purpose. I walked to the small office nook and pulled open a drawer I hadn't touched in months. It was filled with my husband's old file folders, meticulously labeled in his familiar, sharp handwriting. Legal documents, our wills, lists of emergency contacts. I hadn't looked through any of it since the awful, blurry days right after his funeral. My fingers, numb and clumsy, flipped through the stiff manila folders. And then I found it. A document I had completely forgotten about. A power of attorney form, dated 2 years ago. It had been signed during a miserable hospital stay when I had a severe case of pneumonia and could barely breathe, let alone think clearly. And there, listed as my agent, was his name, Liam. My stomach turned over, a nauseating lurch of dread. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone. It was almost midnight, but I didn't care. I sent a text message to my lawyer, Diana. "Quick question," I typed. "If I signed a POA for Liam 2 years ago during a hospital stay, is it still valid?" I didn't expect a reply until morning, but my phone buzzed less than 10 minutes later. The message was short and chilling. "If you never formally revoked it, yes. We need to talk, Grace, first thing in the morning." That's when the last piece of the ugly puzzle clicked into place. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. Liam wasn't just being presumptuous. He wasn't guessing or hoping I'd agree. He was executing a plan, one that had been in motion for far longer than I could have imagined. Sleep was an impossibility. I didn't get a single moment of it that night. I sat on the living room couch, my favorite old robe wrapped tightly around me as if it were a suit of armor, and stared at nothing. The city lights glowed beyond my window, but I saw none of it. My mind was a relentless projector, replaying the scene at the restaurant again and again on a sickening loop. I kept seeing Liam's face as he clinked that spoon against his glass, his voice so full of false sincerity. I dissected the look in his eyes when he turned to me, demanding my compliance. It wasn't love that I saw there. It wasn't even a flicker of hesitation or guilt. It was expectation, cold, hard, and absolute. It was the look of someone cashing a check they believe is rightfully theirs, impatient with the teller for taking too long to count out the money. Olivia's voice was a venomous whisper in my head. "We're just so grateful you agreed." But I never agreed, not with a single word, not with a look, not with any part of my being. But my silence, my panicked, frozen silence, had been their tool. I didn't stop the performance. I nodded. I played my part. That was my mistake, I realized, with a gut-wrenching certainty. And the consequences of that mistake were already spreading like a virus. When the first gray light of dawn finally broke, I reached for my phone with a sense of profound dread. My thumb hovered over the social media app, but I knew I had to look. Olivia had posted a video. It was a slow, panning reel, artistically shot. Shots of my living room, my sanctuary, set to the tune of some soft, melancholy acoustic guitar music. She had filmed it during a visit last week, under the guise of wanting to see my new orchid. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive sentimentality. The beginning of our family's next chapter, saying goodbye to Grandma's place and hello to our new home. So grateful for this legacy. My couch, the one I had painstakingly saved for. My bookshelves, built by my husband's own hands. My window, with the lace curtains I had chosen on a sunny afternoon years ago. It was all there, repurposed as props in her narrative. The post already had 37 comments. So sweet of her to pass it down, one read. Another, wow, she must be so proud of you both. I scrolled through the saccharine lies until my chest felt tight and I couldn't breathe. As if that weren't enough, an email from Liam was waiting in my inbox. The subject line was chillingly corporate, transition plan. There was no warm greeting, no "Hi, Mom." It was a list of things they wanted moved out by the end of the month, followed by a series of suggested dates for the final handover of keys. At the bottom was a link to an online mood board titled Neutral Nursery Aesthetic. I clicked it, my hands shaking. There were dozens of images of serene, minimalist rooms. Photos of what used to be my bedroom, now digitally stripped down to a crib and a rocking chair. I hadn't even had a chance to verbally respond to their ambush at dinner. I hadn't said yes, but they had already moved on without me. I called Diana's office before 9 a.m. The moment I said Liam's name in connection with the old power of attorney, her tone became sharp and focused. "You need to come in today, Grace, not tomorrow, today." I dressed like I was going to war. I chose a pair of perfectly pressed slacks and a crisp collared shirt. I put on shoes that made a firm, decisive noise on hardwood floors. I gathered every folder, every deed, every piece of financial paper I could find that tied me to my own life. In her quiet, orderly office, Diana flipped through the documents, her lips pursed in concentration. She paused on the power of attorney form, reading it over twice. "You never revoked this, Grace," she said, her voice low and serious. "Technically, this gives him the authority to make certain decisions on your behalf if you're deemed medically unable to do so yourself." "But I'm not," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I expected. "I'm perfectly fine." "Correct," she said, looking at me over the top of her glasses. "But that's the loophole they can exploit. If he were to find a single doctor willing to say you were showing signs of memory decline or exhibiting confusion, if he got someone to sign off on a form, he could use this document to challenge your decisions in court." She leaned forward slightly. "It's rare, but it happens, especially in bitter family property disputes." The floor dropped out from under me. "We need to revoke this power of attorney immediately," Diana stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "And from this moment on, you need to be incredibly careful what you say and what you sign. Everything, and I mean everything, needs to go through me first. Do you understand?" I could only nod, not trusting my voice to work. The full, terrifying scope of their plan was becoming clear. When I got home that afternoon, my mind reeling, my key wouldn't work in the front gate of the building. For 2 full minutes, which felt like an eternity, I jiggled it, twisted it, my heart beginning to hammer against my ribs in a fresh wave of panic. I was convinced they had already changed the locks, that I was already barred from my own home. Then, with a final, forceful turn, the lock gave a loud click and opened. It had simply been stiff from the afternoon cold. I felt like an idiot for a second, my fear deflating into embarrassment. But the terror that had seized me was real. That one terrifying moment revealed a new, horrifying possibility I hadn't even considered. They weren't just planning for the future, they were capable of acting in the present. That night, I didn't cook, I didn't turn on the television or tidy the living room. The small, ordinary routines of my life felt frivolous, like relics from a time that no longer existed. The lingering fear from my struggle at the gate had cooled and hardened into something else entirely. It was a cold, sharp-edged resolve. I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot where I had frozen in shock the night before, and I wrote out a list. It was an accounting, a ledger of my son's adult life paid for in large part by me. I wrote down the college tuition I had helped cover when he lost his academic scholarship after a semester of partying too hard. I detailed the cost of their wedding, where I had paid for all the flowers and half of the catering, because Olivia's parents had declared themselves creatively bankrupt. I listed the emergency loan I had given them 2 years ago, a significant sum they claimed was for IVF treatments. They had sworn me to secrecy, painting a heartbreaking picture of their struggle to conceive. My heart had broken for them. I had transferred the money without a second thought. And now, the ugly truth was unavoidable. They weren't even trying to have a baby. They had just dangled the word baby in front of me, knowing I would melt, knowing my desire for a grandchild would override any financial caution. And now, there was this final, breathtaking act of entitlement. My hand ached from gripping the pen so tightly. I walked into my bedroom and opened the closet, pulling down one of the heavy photo albums from the top shelf. I sat on the edge of my bed and flipped through the plastic-covered pages. There was Liam in his Little League uniform, his face smudged with dirt, grinning with a missing front tooth. There was Olivia at their engagement party, her smile wide and showcasing a set of perfectly white, expensive teeth. And there I was, standing with my husband, holding champagne flutes in this very apartment, toasting to the future on the day we moved in. A lifetime of memories, all contained within this home. I closed the book with a soft thud. The past was a foreign country now. Then I pulled out my phone, my fingers moving with a new, steady purpose. I sent a text message to Liam. It contained only one sentence. We need to talk, and not through public announcements or online mood boards. I set the phone on the nightstand and waited. For 4 hours, there was nothing. No call, no text, just silence. I started to wonder if he would ignore me completely. Then, just after 10 p.m., my phone lit up with a notification. His reply had finally come. It was a single, dismissive thumbs-up emoji. That was it, that little yellow icon. And in that moment, I knew with a chilling, absolute clarity that I wasn't his mother anymore. I was an obstacle. I was a locked door he needed to get through, a name on a deed that stood in his way, a problem he needed to manage and move aside. He was done asking. 3 days after the disastrous birthday dinner, a manila envelope slid under my apartment door. I was in the shower at the time and didn't hear it. There was no knock, no doorbell, just the soft, subtle scrape of paper against the bathroom tile. I didn't even notice it until I stepped out of the tub with wet feet and nearly slipped on it. My heart was already racing before I had even picked it up and unfolded the pages inside, my towel wrapped tightly around me. It was a document titled in stark black letters, Preliminary Transfer Agreement, Residential Property. It was a formal contract. There was a line for my name, already filled in, another for Liam, and another for Olivia. The only line left, tellingly blank, was the one for my signature. Attached to the front with a paperclip was a cover note, written in Liam's breezy, confident voice, but clearly typed by someone else, likely a legal assistant. "No rush on this, Mom," it read. "Just need this signed before Friday so we can move forward with the bank approvals. Thanks again for everything." Bank approvals. The phrase struck me like a slap. That meant they weren't just planning. They were already in motion. They were actively using my home, my property, as leverage in their financial dealings. I sank down onto the edge of the tub, the papers growing damp in my trembling hand. I felt a wave of nausea. I immediately texted Diana, my lawyer, telling her what I had received. She called me within minutes. I sent her a clear photo of the document and the note. Her voice on the phone dropped into something calm but incredibly firm. The pleasantries were gone. "Grace, he's moving forward under the legal assumption that this property is already his," she said. "He's creating a paper trail to prove it. If you sign that document, it's over. It becomes legally binding. Do not even leave it out on the counter where someone could see it. I want you to shred it, now." "He slid it under the door," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Then that means he's being strategic," she replied, her tone sharp. "He's making it look like you are a willing and voluntary participant in this process. Do not respond to him. Do not engage in writing. Do not acknowledge you received it. Let me handle it." I hung up the phone, a cold fire spreading through my veins. The shock and the fear were finally burning away, leaving behind something much harder, much stronger. I was not just a grieving widow. I was not a confused old woman, and I was not a victim. Not anymore. That evening, after shredding the transfer agreement into confetti-like strips and burying them at the bottom of the recycling bin, I pulled out the filing cabinet again. Diana's words about creating a paper trail echoed in my mind. If they were building a case against me, I needed to understand every single piece of paper that tied my name to theirs. I was no longer just looking for my own documents. I was hunting for their weapons. That's when I found it. Buried in a folder labeled Medical 2023 was a thick health directive packet from my 2-year-old hospital stay. I remembered the chest infection, the fever, the bone-deep exhaustion. I remembered Liam visiting, his face a mask of filial concern. He had brought this packet with him, full of boilerplate forms and confusing legal jargon. I had been hooked up to an IV, the beep of the heart monitor a constant, irritating rhythm in the room. "Just sign these, Mom," he had urged, placing a pen in my hand. "It's so I can help with the insurance stuff while you're recovering." I hadn't even tried to read them. I had just wanted the conversation to be over so I could rest. I had scribbled my name on 6 signature lines just to get him off my back. Now, reading the fine print under the bright, unforgiving light of my desk lamp, my blood ran cold. Buried deep within the packet was a page titled Limited Authority Designation. It named Liam as my proxy for financial decisions, specifically during periods of medical incapacity. My call to Diana later that night was brief and grim. She confirmed my worst fears. If they could find a single doctor, any medical professional willing to put in writing that I was forgetful or seemed confused, they could use that designation to petition a court and challenge my ability to manage my own assets. It wouldn't be an easy fight for them, she explained, her voice steady, but it would be enough to freeze your accounts and drag you into a costly, exhausting legal battle. And Grace, if you have accidentally agreed to anything over email or text, even something that seemed harmless, they can twist that and present it as evidence of your consent. I went completely still, the phone feeling heavy and cold against my ear. The birthday dinner flashed through my mind again, but this time I saw it with horrifying clarity. The way Olivia had smiled while the camera was recording me, the specific, deliberate way Liam had used past tense language in his announcement. Mom agreed. She's letting us. She said we could. It wasn't sloppy or presumptuous. It was practiced. It was a rehearsed script, designed to narrate a version of the truth they had been carefully constructing behind my back for months, possibly years. And I, in my shock, had walked right into their trap and played my part perfectly. The moment I hung up the phone, the last vestiges of my grief-stricken passivity vanished. The woman who cried over old photo albums was gone. In her place was someone I barely recognized, someone cold and methodical. I spent the next morning on a quiet, systematic rampage. I logged into my online banking and froze my credit with all 3 major bureaus. I changed the passwords to every single one of my financial apps, making them complex and unguessable. I called my bank and my brokerage firm, adding new verbal passwords to my accounts. I drafted and sent a formal notarized letter to revoke every form of power of attorney Liam had ever held. Then, I removed him from my list of emergency contacts at my doctor's office. I didn't reply to his texts anymore,
but I saved every single one, taking a screenshot and filing it away in a new encrypted folder on my computer. I was building my own paper trail now. That evening, a dark thought prompted me to call the building manager. After a few pleasantries, I asked him who had accessed the security gate the night before last. There was a brief hesitation on the other end of the line. "Well," he said slowly, "your son, Liam, used your spare key. He told me he was just checking on you, making sure you were okay." I had not asked him to check on me. I hadn't been sick or hurt. I hadn't even known he still had a spare key. The violation was so profound, it left me breathless. "Is it possible to have the lock on my apartment door changed?" I asked, my voice impressively calm. "Of course," he said, "but it requires a formal request for security reasons." "I'll have one on your desk in the morning," I replied.
That night, I moved all my important documents, the deed to the apartment, my will, my birth certificate, my passport, into a new metal lockbox I bought that afternoon, and I slid it deep under my bed. I stopped drinking my customary glass of wine with dinner. I stopped taking the occasional over-the-counter sleep aid. I needed my mind to be a razor, sharp, clear, and ready. I began journaling every single interaction, every memory, every feeling, in case I ever needed to prove my own mental clarity in a court of law. I even wrote out a fake grocery list one night, full of detail and specific brand names, and added it to the journal, a simple way to timestamp my own handwriting and cognitive function. It was no longer just a feeling, it was a fact. I wasn't being paranoid, I was being hunted. They weren't just hoping I would hand over my home on a silver platter. They were methodically building a case to take it from me, and they believed I was too old, too sad, and too weak to ever fight back. The doorbell rang 2 days later. It was a cheerful, insistent chime that felt completely out of place in the tense new reality of my life. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door silently, my feet soft on the hardwood floor, and peered through the peephole. My breath caught in my throat. It was Olivia, standing on my welcome mat, smiling a brilliant, practiced smile as if nothing had happened. She was holding a large iced coffee in one hand and a pristine white gift bag in the other. For a moment, I considered not answering, just standing there in the silence until she gave up, but I knew she wouldn't. This was a calculated visit, not a casual one. I took a deep breath, unlocked the deadbolt I'd had changed just yesterday, and opened the door halfway, keeping my body positioned in the opening. It was not an invitation to enter. "Grace," she chirped, her voice a cascade of sugar-sweet affection. "I just thought I'd stop by. I was in the neighborhood." She held up the coffee cup, on which my name was misspelled in black marker. "Wanted to check on you, and I brought your favorite, hazelnut cream with extra ice." She tried to hand me the drink, but I didn't move to take it. My hands remained at my sides. "You didn't text first," I stated. It wasn't a question. She gave a light, tinkling laugh, brushing the comment aside as if it were a piece of lint on her expensive jacket. "Oh, I know. I figured it would be a nice surprise to just pop in. You've been so quiet lately, we were getting worried." I let her stand there, embracing the awkward silence, hoping it might unnerve her enough to make her leave. But Olivia was a performer, and the show had to go on. She pushed the gift bag toward me. "It's vitamins," she said, her eyes growing wide, affecting the look of a child about to share a monumental secret. "Pregnancies, actually. We're hoping," she paused for dramatic effect. "But of course, you already knew that part." I just blanked at her. "You're pregnant?" She placed a hand on her perfectly flat stomach, a gesture so theatrical it was almost comical. She was already playing the part. "We're just a couple of weeks along. We weren't going to say anything official yet, but after the other night," she looked down, her voice catching with feigned emotion. "Well, it just meant so much to us that you gave us your place. We really feel like it's a sign." I knew she was lying. I knew it the instant the words left her mouth. There was a desperate, eager flicker in her eyes that betrayed the performance. It wasn't the quiet joy of a hopeful mother. It was the frantic energy of a gambler playing her last card. I finally stepped aside, letting her in. She swept past me into the kitchen, placing her purse on the counter.
Without asking, she opened my refrigerator, pulled out a can of sparkling water, and drank it straight.
No one who was newly and anxiously pregnant, as she claimed to be, would so casually consume caffeine and carbonated water without even checking a label. I didn't say a word. I just watched. She began to walk through my apartment, not as a guest, but as a new owner conducting an inspection. She spoke about where the crib would go, how she would repaint the walls a more modern shade, how she might knock out the narrow hall closet to open up the space. I stood in the corner of my own living room, frozen, listening to her redesign my life as if she were a host on a home flipping show. "This bookshelf," she said, running her perfectly manicured fingers along the dark polished wood, "we can probably just donate it, right? It's a little outdated." My husband built that bookshelf with his own 2 hands 31 years ago. I remained silent. She continued her tour, opening drawers in the hallway, peeking into the laundry room, making little comments on which pieces of my furniture were worth keeping and which were destined for the curb. I followed her silently into my sewing room. "We should probably get started on converting this room into the nursery sooner rather than later," she said, gesturing vaguely at my fabrics and patterns. "Babies need a calm, clutter-free environment, you know." That was when something inside me, something that had been stretched taut for days, finally snapped. But I still didn't yell. My voice, when I finally used it, was quiet and precise. "Olivia, when did your doctor confirm the pregnancy?" She blinked rapidly, caught off guard. She quickly recovered with an awkward laugh. "Oh, you know, it's still really early, too early for most tests. I just know." "So, no ultrasound," I stated. "No blood work." "I mean, we have an appointment on Monday," she stammered, her eyes darting around the room. "Of course, you'll be the first to know the results, obviously." The word hung in the air like an insult. I watched her retreat to the living room and sit on my couch, scrolling through her phone. Her purse sat on the kitchen counter, still open. I waited until I heard the bathroom door click shut. My heart hammering, I walked over to the counter and peered inside the bag. My eyes landed immediately on a familiar-looking manila folder. My hands were steady as I lifted it out. Inside were copies of my apartment's floor plan, marked up with notes for new furniture placement, and a freshly printed estimate of its current market value from a popular property website. They weren't just moving in, they were assessing the property's value, staging it in their minds. A cold, terrifying thought struck me. Maybe they weren't planning to live here at all. Maybe they were planning to flip it. I took out my phone, snapped several clear photos of the documents, and slid the folder quietly back into her purse. I was sitting on the couch, reading a magazine, before she came back out. "Do you want to stay for dinner?" I asked, my voice even. She looked genuinely shocked. Then her face broke into a delighted smile. "Sure, that would be so nice of you, Grace." "Should I call Liam?" she asked. "No," I said smoothly. "Just us girls." I served her frozen pasta that I'd heated in the microwave and a glass of stale wine I knew she wouldn't drink. I let her get comfortable, listening to her chatter on about color palettes and baby names, all while she was completely unaware that I had seen inside her bag. I had seen their plan. After she left around 8 o'clock, still smiling, I locked the door and pushed my heavy sewing machine in front of it as a makeshift barricade. I was not scared anymore. I was focused. I opened my phone, scrolled to the pictures I had just taken, and started a new photo album. I titled it, simply, Proof. This wasn't a family squabble. This was fraud. And now I had the evidence to prove it. I woke up the next morning before sunrise and started packing. But I wasn't packing my life into boxes to be moved into storage. I was packing with information, with strategy. I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and made a call I should have made days ago. I called my old friend Vera, a retired real estate agent who now lived 3 towns over, where she spent most of her days tending to an award-winning rose garden and expertly ignoring her ex-husband's texts. Vera didn't ask why I was calling her at 6:11 a.m. She just heard the tension in my voice and said, "Talk to me, Grace." And I did. The story came pouring out of me in a torrent of hushed, urgent words. I told her everything, every calculated step, from the ambush at my birthday dinner to Olivia's theatrical fake pregnancy announcement. I told her about the documents in the purse, the floor plans, the property value estimate, and the suffocating false narrative they were spinning around me like a silken cocoon. Vera listened without a single interruption, her silence a comforting, solid presence on the other end of the line. When I was finally done, her response was immediate and firm. "You need to get out of there," she said, her voice sharp with purpose. "You need to be gone before they realize you've caught on to their disgusting little game." She offered to help me list the apartment immediately and quietly through her extensive network of private buyers. "No public listings, no online photos, nothing they can track," she explained. "Just word of mouth among serious clients who can close with cash. You'll probably get a little less than the absolute market peak," she admitted, "but it guarantees speed and privacy. It keeps them from being able to interfere or try to contest the sale before it closes." "Do it," I said without a moment's hesitation. For the next 3 days, I became the finest actress of my life. I played the part of the docile, slightly confused, grieving mother to perfection. I sent Liam short, friendly replies to his texts asking if I needed help with packing. I even went on the social media app and liked a new photo Olivia had posted of a crib with a caption full of heart emojis about preparing a nest. To complete the performance, I posted a picture of my own dinner one night, a simple meatloaf and mashed potatoes, with a caption that read, "Nothing beats a quiet night with some home cooking." I wanted them to see me as soft. I needed them to believe I was still grateful, still pliable, still theirs to control. Meanwhile, behind this carefully constructed facade, I was orchestrating my own quiet exit. Vera found a small property for me to inspect, a 2-bedroom cabin nestled in a lakeside retirement town 2 states away. It was a place where no one knew my name, and no one was owed anything by my son. The listing photos showed an outdated kitchen with avocado green countertops and a patio with a few cracks in the concrete, but I didn't care. It was private, it was safe, it would be mine. The seller, a widower looking to downsize quickly, agreed to an all-cash offer if I didn't haggle over the price. We shook hands on the deal the very next day. While Liam and Olivia thought I was at home watching cooking shows and sorting through old belongings, I was on the phone coordinating a wire transfer and scheduling movers for the few essential pieces of furniture I hadn't told anyone I was taking. I hired a quiet man from my old church, Gus, who had a truck and a reputation for not asking questions. In a single afternoon, he boxed up my husband's old workshop gear from the storage locker, the heirloom dishes I couldn't bear to leave behind, and all the boxes of family photos from the attic. I was erasing myself, piece by piece. I told the building superintendent I would be traveling indefinitely for health reasons, and instructed him not to share any information with my family unless he received explicit permission from me in writing. He raised his eyebrows, but thankfully just nodded. Then I went down to the leasing office and officially changed my emergency contact from Liam to Vera. I changed my mailing address to a new P.O. box in the town where the cabin was located and set up the postal service to begin forwarding my mail 2 weeks from now, ensuring there would be no immediate gap that might raise suspicion. I even called the electric company and scheduled a shutoff date, using the excuse that I was moving in with a relative to recover from a medical procedure. The woman on the other end of the line offered her condolences, and I didn't correct her. Every day, I maintained a neutral face and a gentle, accommodating tone in my texts. I let Liam believe I was weak. I let Olivia believe I was a grateful pushover. But behind their backs, with every phone call and every signature, I was systematically dismantling the future they had stolen from me. On the 4th day, Olivia texted me a video she had taken of herself sitting on my living room couch, talking to the camera about her plans for bringing warmth and new life back into the space. The caption on the post read, "Soon to be ours, but forever Grandma's legacy." It already had over 2,000 views. I didn't feel a single tear. I just took a screenshot, saved it to my proof folder, and continued with my work. That night, I left them one single calculated hint. I placed an empty suitcase in the main hallway, right where Olivia would be sure to see it the next time she popped in unannounced. She would assume I was finally starting to pack for my exit. She would tell Liam. They would think they still had time. They would feel secure in their victory. They didn't have any time at all. I was leaving before the week was out, and by the time they finally realized what I had done, the keys to this apartment would be in someone else's hands, and the only trace of me they'd find would be a locked file cabinet full of things they couldn't have, and the lingering scent of lavender they would never be able to wash out of the curtains. It all came to a head on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky outside was a flat, indifferent gray. I was just wrapping up a call with the title company, getting confirmation that the apartment sale would officially close in less than 72 hours. The deal was all cash with no contingencies, exactly as Vera had so brilliantly arranged it. I had just hung up the phone, a wave of relief washing over me, when the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock. It was sharp, insistent, and heavy with impatience. It was the knock of someone who believed the place. I didn't answer. I just stood in the hallway, my body perfectly still, and listened. My heart wasn't racing. It was beating with a slow, steady, and deliberate rhythm. The knock came again, harder this time. Then, a voice. Liam's. "Mom, open the door." I didn't move. I knew he still had his old key, the one that no longer worked. I also knew, with a deep and profound satisfaction, that I had had the locks changed 2 days ago, a crucial detail I hadn't mentioned to a single soul except the locksmith. I heard the scrape of metal as he tried the key in the lock. I heard it fail. I heard him jiggle it, a sound of growing frustration, followed by a tense pause. Then came a much heavier, angrier knock, the sound of his fist hitting the solid wood. "Mom, I need to talk to you, now." I waited, my arms folded across my chest. Eventually, he stopped trying the lock and simply started talking, his voice muffled but clear through the door. "Look, you're not answering my texts and Olivia is freaking out. We just need to know what's going on." I offered no reply. I just leaned against the wall, a silent sentinel in my own home. His tone shifted then, losing its false veneer of concern and hardening into accusation. "We found out about the realtor," he said, the words sharp. "Vera called someone we know. You're trying to sell the place from under us. Are you serious?" Silence.
"You are actively sabotaging your own family. Do you even understand that?" he demanded, his voice rising. More silence. Then his voice dropped lower, becoming quieter, more menacing, as if he believed I was standing right on the other side of the door. "If you don't open this door right now and talk to me like an adult, I swear to God, Mom, I will do what I have to do legally." He left after that, his footsteps stomping away down the hall, but he left something behind, an envelope, shoved aggressively through the mail slot in the door. It landed on the floor with a soft flap, almost exactly like the one I had received before. Inside was not a friendly note. It was a formal, typed notice from a law firm I didn't recognize. The document was titled Request for Transitional Occupancy Review, and a single, terrifying section was highlighted in bright yellow ink, Pending Potential Medical Guardianship Claim. I picked up the paper, carried it to the table, and called Diana. She answered before the second ring. I read the highlighted sentence to her aloud, my voice even and devoid of emotion. She let out a long, weary sigh. "They're escalating, Grace," she said, her voice grim. "They're making their official move. They're going to try and challenge your competency in a court filing. They're not just pushing you anymore. They are building their legal case to have you declared unfit." That night, I did not panic. I did not cry. I sat at my kitchen table with my new lockbox open on its surface, and I worked. I organized my documents into meticulous piles. I copied files onto a secure flash drive. And then I did something Diana had suggested. I turned on my phone's voice recorder, propped it up on the table, and I began to speak. I recorded myself reading a clear, concise summary of my financial decisions to date, making sure to state the current date and time for the record. I emailed the audio file to the secure folder Diana had set up for me. I attached a list of every single financial transaction I had made in the past 5 years. I attached every screenshot of every manipulative text. I attached every email. I narrated why I had sold the apartment, my voice clear and steady, without a single stammer. I explained my purchase of the cabin, providing the dates, the sale price, and the contact information for the seller. I attached the inspection report. It was an exhausting, painstaking process that took hours, but I knew it had to be airtight. I was no longer just protecting my assets from my predatory son. I was protecting my mind, my very identity. Because I had come to understand a terrible, fundamental truth about the world. The moment someone with power says you're forgetful, the moment they plant the seed of doubt about your memory, people stop listening to what you actually remember. They start looking for proof of your decline, and your truth gets buried under their suspicion. I was making sure my truth was etched in stone. The very next day, Olivia showed up alone. This time, she didn't even bother to knock. She stood in the public hallway of my building and began to yell, her voice shrill and piercing, loud enough that I could see the blinds twitching in the apartment doors across the hall. It was a calculated, public performance. "We are trying to grow our family, and you are being intentionally cruel," she screamed, her voice cracking with manufactured hysteria. "You promised us. You said we'd have a home. You said we were welcome here." I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. She had her phone out, held up to capture the scene. I could see the little red light blinking in the corner of the screen. She was filming. She wasn't here to reason with me. She was here to create content for their campaign of lies. Taking a deep, steadying breath, I opened the door.
I opened it just enough to be seen, a sliver of my body visible, but not enough for her camera to capture the interior of my apartment, or for her microphone to clearly pick up my voice. I looked at her, my face a calm, unreadable mask, and I said only one word, my voice low and even: "Leave." Her video caught that single word. The final cut, I was sure, would show her, the distraught, pregnant, hopeful mother, reaping in a hallway. And it would show me, the cold, unfeeling matriarch, looking on without a shred of emotion before shutting the door in her face. I gave them exactly the villain they needed for their story. That night, a new video went up on Olivia's social media account. The title was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, "When Family Betrays You, a Pregnancy Without a Home." It was expertly edited with sad instrumental music and slow fades between shots of Olivia crying in the hallway and old happy family photos she had pilfered from my albums. It had over 4,000 likes within a few hours. The comments were a fresh wave of agony. "How could any mother do this to her only son?" one person wrote. Another chimed in, "Disgusting behavior from a boomer hoarder. She's probably got cats everywhere." And the one that cut the deepest, "A woman like that doesn't deserve to have grandkids." I took a screenshot of everything. I saved every vicious post, every cruel comment, and sent it all in a neat, dated file to Diana. The next day, my phone buzzed with a text from Liam. It was a single, menacing sentence. "If you want to avoid court, sign the attached, and we can forget all of this ever happened." Attached was a PDF file. I didn't have to open it to know what it was. It was a transfer of deed agreement, a final, desperate attempt at coercion. I imagined the document, my name typed neatly at the top, his and Olivia's signatures already affixed at the bottom, just waiting for my surrender. I forwarded the entire message, PDF unopened, directly to Diana. Then, for the first time in days, I texted Liam back. My fingers were steady on the screen. "You will be served with a formal notice from my legal counsel within the week. Do not contact me again." Then I turned off my phone. The severing of that connection felt like a final, clean cut. By sunset that evening, my bags were packed and waiting by the door. The keys for the new owners were on the counter, next to a short note I had written. It simply said, "Everything here is yours now, except for the silence. I'm taking that with me."
I left at 4:30 a.m., in that deep, dark stillness just before the sky begins to change. The city streets were quiet and empty. The only sound was the rhythmic click and whir of my rolling suitcase crossing the cracked pavement outside the apartment building I had called home for 32 years. The place where I had loved my husband, raised my son, and grieved my losses. I did not look back, not once. Vera met me 2 towns over at an all-night diner. She had a hot cup of coffee waiting for me and a warm, steady smile on her face that said everything she didn't need to say out loud. Her presence was a quiet harbor after a long and brutal storm. I was no longer just Grace, the victim. I was Grace, the survivor, and my journey was just beginning. The cabin was 4 hours away, a long drive that felt like a journey across a border into a new country. Vera had insisted on driving me herself, and I spent most of the trip in a state of quiet exhaustion, the tension slowly seeping out of my bones as the city skyline disappeared in the rearview mirror, replaced by rolling hills and endless stretches of green. We arrived just as the afternoon sun was filtering through the tall pine trees. The cabin was tucked away near a deep blue lake, surrounded by nothing but the gentle rustle of leaves and the vast, profound silence of the woods. When I stepped out of the car, the air smelled clean, like damp earth and pine needles.
When I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I didn't unpack right away. I didn't even turn on a light. I just stood in the middle of the empty kitchen, my purse still on my shoulder, and I exhaled. It was a deep, shuddering release of breath that seemed to carry with it months of fear, anxiety, and grief. It felt like I had been holding my breath since my birthday dinner, and only now, in the quiet sanctuary of this small, simple cabin, could I finally let it go. I didn't check my phone. I knew what would be waiting for me there, and I was right. When I finally summoned the will to power it on 3 days later, the ensuing digital onslaught was immediate and overwhelming. 37 missed calls, 19 voicemails, more than 60 text messages. Most were from Liam, with a few venomous ones from Olivia mixed in, and several from numbers I didn't recognize. No doubt they're friends, recruited as flying monkeys for their smear campaign. But it was the group texts that made my stomach twist into a tight, painful knot. They had pulled in everyone: cousins, old family friends, even my own sister. Olivia had forwarded the manipulative video of me closing the door on her, presenting it as unassailable proof of my cruelty. Liam had written a long, self-pitying message about how I had callously abandoned them right when their baby was supposedly coming. He painted a picture of himself as the devoted son, betrayed and left homeless by his unstable mother who had run away like a coward. The lie about the baby was still going strong. And what was worse, what truly broke a piece of my heart, was that people were believing it. I didn't reply to a single message, but I forced myself to read every one. The disappointment hit me like a wave of ice water. These were people I had hosted for holidays, people I had helped with bills when they were struggling, people I had called and comforted when their own parents had passed away. Now, they sent messages dripping with condemnation. "I truly hope you come to your senses, Grace." Or, "Family is supposed to stick together, no matter what." It was painfully clear that Liam wasn't just rewriting our story for himself. He was successfully casting himself as the tragic victim for the entire family to see. But then, amidst the flood of judgment, something unexpected happened. A private text message appeared from my niece, Sophie, the one who had always been quiet and observant, the one who never seemed to fall for Olivia's charm. "Aunt Grace," it read, "I don't buy any of this for a second. Are you okay?" I replied instantly, "Yes, I'm safe and I'm done." She sent back a single heart emoji. "Call me if you ever need backup." I didn't cry, but I felt the sting of tears behind my eyes. It was the quiet, fierce power of loyalty. A small, vital reminder that not everyone had been fooled by the performance. The next day, Diana called to confirm that the sale of the apartment had officially closed. The funds were transferred and the deed was filed. Legally, the apartment was no longer mine, and it would never be Liam's. I asked her about the guardianship threats.
She gave a short, dry laugh. They won't risk filing now, Grace. You've outmaneuvered them at every turn. Their social media sob story won't hold up for a second in court once we present the real timeline of events. But, she added, her voice growing serious again, you should update your will, immediately. A small, grim smile touched my lips. I already did, I told her, weeks ago. Everything I owned now went to a community trust I had established. My new cabin, my savings, even the small life insurance policy I had maintained all these years. Liam and Olivia were not only cut out completely, but they were also legally and explicitly blocked from ever contesting the decision. That evening, I emailed the final, signed copy of the new will to Diana.
Then I poured myself a tall glass of cold water and sat on the front porch of the cabin, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. It was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was a clean, wide-open quiet. My phone buzzed one last time before I resolved to turn it off for the night. It was a text from Liam. There was no greeting, no question, no apology, just 7 hateful words. If Dad could see you now, he'd be disgusted. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what his father would say if he were alive. He wouldn't be disgusted. He would look at the lengths I had gone to protect myself and our home, and he would say, she should have done it sooner. It started with a package, delivered about a week later. There was no return address, no note stuck to the plain brown wrapping, just a slim white box left directly in front of my cabin's front door. It was tied with a tasteful ribbon, presented like some kind of peace offering. My guard was instantly up. Inside, nestled in layers of white tissue paper, was a silver-framed sonogram photo. A small generic gift card was tucked into the corner, with a message written in Olivia's loopy, stylized handwriting. Can we please start over? O and L. The image looked real enough at first glance, a grainy black and white picture of hopeful beginnings. But a cold knot of certainty formed in my stomach. I had seen this exact image before. Months ago, Olivia had posted it on her social media page. It was a stock sonogram photo she had downloaded from a pregnancy app and used as a placeholder for our vision board. They hadn't even bothered to find a new fake. They had printed out the old one, framed it, and mailed it to me, assuming I was too old, too out of touch, or too stupid to remember. I set the frame on the kitchen counter, making a point not to let my fingerprints touch the glass. I felt a wave of something colder and heavier than anger. It was a profound and weary disgust. 2 days after that, the email arrived. The subject line contained a single word: dinner. The message body was just as brief. We'll be in your area this weekend. Let's just talk. No pressure, just family. I read the message, deleted it, and did not respond. On Saturday night, just as the sun was dipping below the tree line and painting the lake in shades of orange and purple, a pair of headlights cut through the dusky quiet of my gravel road. I was washing my own dinner dishes, and I watched from the kitchen window as a familiar silver SUV parked at the base of the short path leading to my door. Liam and Olivia got out. They were dressed far too nicely for a surprise visit in the woods. Olivia was navigating the gravel in a pair of completely impractical heels, and Liam was wearing his old blazer, the one he always wore when he wanted to look respectable. He was holding a bottle of wine. I dried my hands, turned off the kitchen light, and waited. I did not open the door. I let them knock. The first rap was soft, hesitant, then a little harder. "Mom," Liam called out, his voice strained with forced casualness. "We know you're in there. We just want to talk." He paused. "We drove all this way." I stood inside my quiet, dark cabin, my hands resting on the back of a wooden chair, not moving, not making a sound, not reacting in any way. Olivia's voice joined his, suddenly cracking with that same false emotion she had used in the hallway. "You're shutting out your own grandchild," she yelled, her voice carrying easily through the quiet evening air. "Is that really what you want, Grace? To be all alone?" I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The person she was yelling at didn't exist anymore. They stood outside my door for 22 minutes. I timed it on my kitchen clock. Eventually, their pleading and their accusations tapered off into frustrated silence.
The wine bottle was left on my front step, and they drove off without another word.
I opened the door, picked up the bottle, and looked at the label. Forgiveness, Pinot Noir. I poured the entire thing down the drain. That night, my phone lit up with one final message from Liam. You win. Hope it was worth losing your family. I didn't feel a sting of guilt or a pang of regret. I simply took a screenshot, added it to my proof folder, and then, with a final satisfying tap of the screen, I deleted his contact from my phone for good. The next morning, I had coffee with my new neighbor, June. She had moved to the area after divorcing her husband of 40 years and had started a tiny, successful soap-making business out of her garage. She had a sharp wit and a laugh that made you want to laugh along with her. She let out a hoot of laughter when I told her about the fake framed sonogram. Oh, honey, people get real bold when they think there's money involved, she said, shaking her head. But you did something they never expected. You didn't give them what they wanted. That makes you dangerous to them now. I nodded slowly, letting the words sink in. Dangerous. It felt new and unfamiliar. It felt right. That week, I bought a new raised garden bed and spent a sunny afternoon planting thyme and mint. I joined the local food co-op. When my phone buzzed again on Friday, it was a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Curiosity won out a few minutes later, and I hit play. It was Olivia. Her voice was different now, stripped of its usual bravado, replaced by a tone of weary, calculated sincerity. Hi, Grace. It's me, she said. Listen, I know things got messy, and I just wanted to say that we're still hoping to keep a door open. For the baby, for the future. Please call me back. I deleted the message, because the only door that mattered now was my own, the one they could never bully their way through again. It wasn't a dramatic affair. There was no mahogany-paneled office, no gasps from shocked relatives gathered for a tense reading of a will. It was just a quiet meeting over black coffee at my lawyer Diana's desk on a cloudy Thursday morning. The simple, final signature on the last page of the document felt less like an ending and more like a confirmation, sealing what I had already known deep in my bones for weeks. Liam and Olivia were officially and irrevocably cut out of everything. There was no fallback clause, no vaguely worded loophole for reconsideration. It was a clean, binding, and airtight legal document, stating that every single asset I owned, from my little cabin to my savings account to the silver photo frame on my new nightstand, would now belong to a community endowment I had created. I had named it in my husband's honor, dedicating it to a single cause, supporting older women who were escaping financial or emotional abuse from their own families. My lawyer, Diana, slid a hard copy of the finalized trust across the desk to me as she double-checked each page one last time. It's done, Grace, she said, her voice full of a quiet satisfaction. If they ever try to challenge this, they will lose. The paper trail we've built is unbreakable. I nodded and took the folder, the weight of it in my hands feeling less like paper and more like armor. 2 days later, my niece Sophie called me. I think Liam knows something is final, she said, her voice low. He's been posting all those passive-aggressive quote images on his social media again. You know the type. Betrayal always comes from the ones you thought were closest to you. That kind of stuff. She paused, and Olivia changed her online bio. It just says, chosen family only now. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, it was a real laugh. Short, hard, and completely free of pain. Let them post their quotes, I told Sophie. They lost the right to use my name the moment they tried to steal it. A week after that, I received a formal letter in my new P.O. box from the charity's board of directors. They were confirming that the account for the endowment had officially gone live. It was called the Serenity Trust, and my first deposit had already been allocated to its first recipient. I reread the paperwork twice, a feeling of profound, quiet purpose settling over me, before tucking it safely into the cabinet beside my box of tea bags. That night, I opened a bottle of sparkling water and sat on my porch as a cool breeze came off the lake. I found myself scrolling through my phone, looking at the online listing for the apartment I no longer owned. It had been updated with new photos. A new family had moved in. They looked young, simple, and happy. There were no calculated posts about nursery plans, no manipulative captions, just genuine smiles in a clean, bright living room, no filters. And there, in the background of one of the photos, I saw it. The old, dark wood bookshelf my husband had built all those years ago. It was still standing right where it had always been. They hadn't torn it down or donated it. They had placed a row of small, cheerful-looking plants on its shelves. Seeing it there, preserved and appreciated, felt like a kind of closure I never knew I needed. My phone buzzed later that night with a message from a number I vaguely recognized. It was from Liam's old college roommate, of all people, a man I hadn't seen in over a decade. I heard about what they did, the message read, saw some of the crazy stuff they were posting. Just wanted to say you were right to cut them off. I wish my own mom had done the same before my sister drained her accounts dry. I typed back a simple 2-word reply. Thank you. Because the truth was, I hadn't just protected myself. I had, in my own quiet way, put a name to a silent, insidious epidemic. A private pain that millions of people, especially older women, lived through behind closed doors but never, ever talked about. I was done being quiet. And while Liam and Olivia stewed in their echo chamber of fake grievances and curated victimhood, I had successfully rewritten the ending to the story they thought they were entitled to write. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a fight. I didn't yell or scream or cry. I gave them silence. And I was learning with each passing day that my silence was louder and more powerful than anything they could ever scream. 6 months later, I stood on the back porch of my cabin, barefoot, my hands wrapped around a warm mug of mint tea. The mint was from the planter box I had built myself, its leaves fragrant and sharp in the cool morning air. I watched a line of birds trace the sky, their path like a string being pulled across the vast blue canvas of the lake. I hadn't heard a single word from Liam or Olivia in over 2 months, not since the final legal notice from the estate went through, formally barring them from contacting me about any inheritance or financial matters. They didn't contest the will. They didn't try to call one last time. I think, finally, they understood that I was truly gone, not just physically absent, but entirely erased from their lives. The version of me they had once known how to manipulate had packed her bags and disappeared from the face of the earth, leaving no forwarding address. My days were different now, filled with a quiet, simple rhythm. I spent my mornings in the garden, my hands in the cool soil. My afternoons were often spent volunteering at the small community center in town. My evenings were for learning how to play chess with June, who swore that I had a killer instinct hidden under all that politeness. I had made friends, real ones, who never asked about money and who didn't only smile when they needed something from me. The cabin had become more than a retreat. It was a full-scale restart. I cooked again for the pure joy of it. I found myself laughing out loud at silly things. I slept through the night without clutching my phone to my chest like a weapon. The day before what would be my 62nd birthday, I received a letter from my niece, Sophie. Inside the envelope was a photo of her newborn daughter, a beautiful, tiny thing with a head full of dark hair, swaddled in a soft pink blanket. The handwritten note tucked behind it was short and simple. It read, "If she grows up to be half as strong as you, I'll have done something right." I pinned the photo to my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a sunflower, and then I sat at my kitchen table and cried. They were the quiet kind of tears that don't sting or burn. They were the kind that rinse the very last of a deep, old pain away, leaving you clean. That evening, I sat at the same table and wrote a check to a shelter in another state that helps older women escape situations of financial control. I signed it, sealed it in an envelope, and on a small, separate slip of paper, I wrote a short, anonymous note to be included for the recipient. Use it well. She got out. As the sun dipped behind the trees and a gentle breeze moved through the wind chimes I'd hung from an old pine hook, my phone buzzed one last time on the counter, an unknown number. I didn't flinch, I didn't feel a jolt of anxiety, or even a flicker of curiosity. I walked over, powered the phone completely off, and slid it into a drawer. I didn't need it anymore. Because
This life I had built with my own two hands, with no audience, no performance, and no one clapping for a version of me they had helped to break, was finally entirely mine. The cabin was quiet, and so was I. And for the first time in more years than I could count, that silence didn't feel like something was missing. It felt like peace. Permanent. Final. Exactly how I had always wanted it. Exactly what they were never, ever going to touch again. Grace's journey is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can come from those we love most, often disguised as care and concern. Her story teaches us that financial and emotional abuse isn't always a loud confrontation. Sometimes it's a quiet, calculated campaign of manipulation. The most important lesson is that reclaiming your power isn't about winning a fight, but about strategically and silently building a fortress to protect your peace and your future. It's about recognizing your own value, setting unbreakable boundaries, and understanding that you have the right to write your own ending, no matter your age or circumstances. Grace didn't just escape a terrible situation, she transformed her pain into a legacy of hope for others who might feel trapped and alone. If this story of resilience and empowerment resonated with you, please show your support by giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel. Every like and new subscriber helps us to continue sharing powerful narratives that truly matter. Your support makes this community possible. We would love to know where our viewers are joining us from. Please take a moment to leave a comment below, telling us which region or country you're watching from.